I'll just show you the results of the survey to start with. The first question was, did you watch the Dispatches documentary, or have you followed reports on the expose of Russell Brand? So for me, I was surprised 35% have not followed any reports, because it's been all over the newspapers and the TV and social media for the whole week, as far as I could see. But anyway, that's interesting that a lot of people didn't even follow it who watched this show. But of those who did, who have followed it, these are the questions that come after that. Do you think the women who spoke out in the documentary went to the media due to mistrust of the police? Yes, 37%, no, 23%, and 40% other. So there's a kind of mixed views on that. Do you believe Russell Brand is guilty of the specific charges aimed at him in the Dispatches episode? Yes, 33%, no, 11%, 56% other. There's a lot of people who see a nuanced view on this. They don't think it's black or white. Do you believe this is trial by media? Yes, 71%, no, 29%. That's quite a big majority there. I found this quite surprising. Do you believe sex addiction is a real thing? No, 21%, other 20%. And so really only 59% believe sex addiction is a real thing. And we're going to talk about that a bit later in the discussion. Do you think the media have been hypocritical in their coverage of Brand as they supported him during his worst period of behaviour? Yes, 85% think the media have been hypocritical. Do you think Russell Brand has played a useful role in scrutinising the establishment? Yes, 51%. But then it's a bit split, and there seems to be a lot of people who don't think Russell Brand is particularly doing a great job at scrutinising the media, and others do. With over 6 million subscribers on YouTube, similarly, do you think Russell Brand has become a threat to the establishment? It's a division again there, pretty much down the middle. Do you think the expose on Russell Brand and the subsequent media storm has been part of a concerted attempt to take him down? Again, it's split down the middle. Do you think it's right for the government to write to platforms like YouTube and TikTok to request that Brand's videos be demonetised? Quite surprised that nearly 20% of people think that they should that his videos should be taken down. But the whole issue, as anyone who's been on social media, the whole issue has been very divisive. So I wanted to hear different views on this. I put a survey out, and I'm just going to bring on Lizzie Fletcher first. How are you doing, Lizzie?
Hiya, I'm fine, thank you.
Now, what I mean, the start of the questions was about the allegations on the documentary. I mean, do you think that it is trial by media? Do you think that there should be this should go to court before and do you think it's impossible for women to trust the police to go to them with to say what's happened with Russell Brand? What's your take on that?
Absolutely, it's trial by media for a start. Absolutely. This debate and the whole debate is not about believing or disbelieving women. It's very difficult for a woman to report sexual abuse of any kind, sexual assault. It's demeaning. You go through a whole process of being investigated yourself, and you're investigated to the point where they bring that information out in court to try and portray you as some sort of seeker of what's happened to you, you know. So yeah, it's completely understandable, and I think that's exactly why they use it. But this debate isn't about whether he's guilty or not. this is due process is the only tool we have to establish that, and we must leave it to that. Until then, Russell Brand is innocent until proved guilty, like every other person in this country should be, shouldn't they?
Well, thank you. I'm just going to bring Trish on. Let's put her hand up. Trish, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi. I was thinking about something else, but yeah, absolutely. I think with the Russell Brand question, for a start, as far as I'm concerned, if somebody is all over a TV program we're being told that he's guilty, then how is he ever going to be tried in court fairly? Surely his judges are going to work really hard now to say the jurors are biased. I think anybody who's been involved in Russell Brand has probably faced some predatory behaviour. He's a self-confessed predator. He is a sexual predator, but I don't think we can say for 1 second that this isn't commonplace in the world of showbiz. We know that very young girls were brought to people like Mark Bolan, David Bowie. We know that they were called the babies, and they were 13 and 14 years old. This is not new. It's not unexpected. And the girls and women that he's harmed, if he has harmed girls and women, which is probably, at the very least, he's been a predator. The truth is, they're not going to get justice either now. You know, none of this should be on the TV. I don't like TV exposés, not of care homes, not of anything. I think the minute you put it on telly, it becomes entertainment. And actually, he's only ever been used for entertainment, and he's an entertainer, and this is just more of it. I find it really abhorrent, the whole thing being on TV, and he's certainly innocent until proven guilty.
Right, I'm bringing Carol Vincent on. How you doing, Carol?
I didn't expect it to.
I
have my hand up for something later about Diana.
Hi there.
Hiya.
Hello. Yes, I agree with what Trish and Lizzie have said, actually, that innocent until proven guilty. I've been in that position many times before, where there's been allegations against me which have been totally untrue, and I've been fit up by various people at various times. But I actually did some shows with Russell when I came out of Big Brother, and I have to say, he's very tall. He's an imposing figure. He has this look where he kind of surveys the room. He's very, he is a presence. He is a huge presence. His whole stage show, which, bought him the notoriety and bought him all of the TV contracts and radio contracts that he got, were based upon him being openly sexualized in his behavior and manner, and he was sexually very promiscuous at the time and said so. We know you add drugs and alcohol to that situation, and it becomes very precarious and very difficult. What I would say is that serious sexual assaults and rape don't just happen to women either. And there have been various TV people recently, including Schofield, who have been outed by the media. And I agree that that has to stop, really, because when did the Dispatches programme start to investigate this? How long have they been investigating? Why has it come about now? I don't know whether anything illegal has happened, and until an investigation occurs, we won't know. But what I would say is that around the country, there's something called Sapphire Haven, and that is, they are places, very safe places for people to go and report immediately if they wish to, serious sexual assaults and rape. And they are treated incredibly sensitively, and all sorts of evidence is taken. That evidence can stay where it is, even without it being reported to the police, for up to 30 years. And so it should. the people who work there are, they go out to victims, they're crisis workers, but there's also nurses, doctors, and sexual health advisors there. I worked very closely with the services in one of the areas. And I think what I'd like to say is that if ever anything happens to someone, do try and contact them, because if you don't want to go to the police immediately, and many people don't, not just women, as I said, many people don't wish to go to the police immediately, and often now it is around trust as well. But they can have all of the details recorded, and they are treated incredibly sympathetically, and they are advised of next moves, and as I said, at some point in the future. And some of these women that are making allegations will have to be looked at. Some of them went to the police and were ignored, and we now know that the police have done that a lot, and not just for women. I know gay men who have been ignored when they've been to the police, and I know people who have taken their lives because they've been ignored after sexual assaults and rapes, and have become mentally very unwell as a result of what's happened to them, but not been able to vocalize that or go and seek assistance. And I think we need to be much more aware and shut down predatory talk, misogynistic sort of language, and language that is upsetting, aggressive, and so on and so forth. But the time when Russell has moved on, and I'm aware of some very, very good work that he's done, and I can't speak about it at the moment. I'm aware he also has been in recovery several times. I'm aware that he also did university degrees. He's taken himself off. He's got his own family, and I feel for them at the moment. He's got daughters. I believe his wife is pregnant again at the moment, and this is a shocking time for this family and other families and those women to have this. But I think it's been trialed by media for a long time for a lot of people, the Gary Glitters of the world have got away with all sorts for years, Jimmy Savile and so on and so forth. Those people could have been prosecuted by Starmer, actually, and people around him at the time, but weren't. So we need to be very balanced about this. And I cannot say whether he is guilty or not of the charges that are being brought. But I can say he was very promiscuous, very Benny Hill-like in many ways, and all that business. I think when I was on one of the shows with him, we were doing something with feet, and he said, "Oh, I like a lovely toe. Oh, is it good for sucking?" And I shut him down by sort of saying, "Behave yourself. I could be your mother, and you wouldn't talk to your mother like that. So shut up." And I think we can't keep finding people guilty because of something, and successful people who are not in the mainstream media are often shut down. So that's what I have to say.
The point is that these charges, he could be guilty. It'd be better to put him to court than do it by media. We don't know.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been to court many times.
Well, I just want to move on a bit. Thank you so much.
Just to say, my most famous acquittal was when Tony Benn was one of my witnesses, the headline as I came out of court with Tony and his lovely cigar and everything in hand was a trunch date with Tony. So the media were condemning me to begin with, but then give this, when you're acquitted, they're all over you like a wet fish, saying we knew it wasn't true. We knew it wasn't true. They are out for themselves, and Murdoch certainly has been out for himself. Disgracefully, the Millie Dowler stuff, absolute disgrace. So
okay. Well, look, thank you, Carol. I know you'd like to.
Welcome.
Right, cheers. Right, I'm just going to and thank you, Lizzie. I'll bring you back on a bit later. I just wanted to address one part of the survey, and also what I've picked out from the coverage of Russell Brand is the sex addict part of it. People are saying in the survey, quite a number of people sort of disbelieving that there's such a thing as a sex addict. I think I first heard about it with Michael Douglas in quite a couple of decades ago, as someone who was a sex addict, and I was a bit incredulous about it. But we've got on the Zoom, we've got a recovering sex addict. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, mate, I can hear you.
Yeah, I mean, what's your view on the way that Russell Brand's sex addiction is being covered? Because you know, I'm seeing stories about him having blurry eyes, and it's almost like he's a devil. Not, I don't really get. I mean, can you tell us a bit about what sex addiction is, and to sort of show that it prove that it exists?
Well, proof is the fact that I am one. I don't hide from anything. Russell Brand, I feel, has been vilified. I think the fact that he is a celebrity, and he was a celebrity before all this came out, that everyone's just jumped on the bandwagon and thought, oh, right, great, we can make some money here. Whether that's selling papers or selling your story or whatever the case may be. But sex addiction is real. It is very, very real. The 12 steps, which is used for alcoholism, drugs, gambling, overeating, overwork, and sex addiction, has been going since about 1939. So consequently, it's got a big amount of data behind it. One of the things that we say all the time is it works if you work it, which means that if you live your life according to some very, very simple guidelines, then you won't end up living your life in misery and sadness and guilt and fear, which is something we all do. Every sex addict I've ever met, and that's, believe me, it's quite a few, always says when they first come into the group that they are tired of constantly being scared. Now, not all sex addicts do things that are illegal. I didn't, okay? My behavior was off the wall. My behavior was bad in that I could not be faithful at all in any type, shape, form, or description. There was nothing in my history to say why I became that way. I had a nice upbringing, I had a loving family, a nice, reasonable upbringing, so there was no cause for that. But sex addiction is real. It affects a lot more people than you would be surprised at. There are so many people who are of the opinion that it's a man's way of doing things. What's wrong with a man going out getting sex?
Can I just ask you, because the word being used is promiscuous about Russell Brand, and a lot of the clips that they show of him are of him being lewd and sexual, and he doesn't behave like that now, as far as I can see. he's changed. What is the difference between someone who's promiscuous and a sex addict?
Well, a sex addict has no control. He doesn't have an off switch. From the moment he wakes up to the time he actually finally gets to sleep at night, he is constantly thinking about sex. I must stop saying he. They constantly think about sex. It's the only thing that is of any real interest to them. Not their wives, not their families, not their relations, not their job. All of that is secondary. All of that is just as a means to get what the addict really wants, which is his fix, their fix.
Do you see? I mean, I don't want to, I don't know if you know him or not, but do you see Russell Brand as having a good recovery from sex addiction now? Do you think he has shown good recovery?
Yes, I think he's doing really well. All these allegations are in the past. There's nothing, as far as I know, there's nothing recent. So if he's doing recovery, whichever way he's doing it, then yeah, he's doing well. It is that we do change the way that we live our lives. I can honestly say in all my, and I'm getting on a bit now, I've never been more content and calm as I am now today. Right.
Okay. Well, look, thank you for coming on and being so honest about it, and I think shed some light on this as well. Thank you.
No worries at all.
Now I'm going to because my feeling on this is that there's a lot of stuff about his behaviour that's merging in with the allegations of what he did, the sexual assault, rape, and the behaviour is separate, I think, from the actual specific allegations. Ben Timberley's on the call. Ben, what would you like to add to what's been said?
Hi, Crispin. So this is a very tough one. I think in terms of the situation, we're facing what I would describe as a wholesale attack. Not as against Russell Brand or anything like that. This is an attack against our ability to understand things, to actually be able to sit there and say, yes, we know exactly what is going on here. And unfortunately, at the moment, that doesn't appear to be the case in terms of what is happening. So we've got a real problem in terms of how we understand this issue. And what I'd like to do, if possible with you, Crispin, is share my screen so that people can see this quote that I've got on here. Is that possible? Thank you, buddy. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, so there is a concept known as splitting in psychology, which is really, really important. It's called black and white thinking in extremes, or all or nothing thinking. It's the failure in a person's thinking to bring together the dichotomy, as in the two opposing topics of both perceived positive and negative qualities of something into a cohesive, realistic whole. It is a common defense mechanism wherein the individual tends to think in extremes. An individual's actions and motivations are all good or all bad with no middle ground. This kind of dichotomous interpretation is contrasted by an acknowledgement of certain nuances known as shades of grey. So I'm going to stop sharing that now. I think in terms of the debate and the questions that we've been having, it's fairly clear that the discussion around Brand has been utterly split into people who are absolutely for him or absolutely against him, with the voices in the middle saying, hold on a minute, there's a lot more going into this. Those are the things where people need to really say, okay, we need to look at this more. And if you break it down, there are different parts of this conversation. There is whether he is guilty or not in terms of the allegations that have been leveraged against him. There is his work in terms of the exposés, the journalism that he has been doing, and it is journalism. And then you've got the whole issues around, his sex addiction, around his facilitation by media outlets, the Murdochs, that sort of thing. And we've got some real serious problems here. We've already had discussions here about, whether he is a sex addict or not, around whether he is capable of, or at least he was capable of being able to make rational decisions based on his what is essentially an illness. That is a separate discussion. I think I'm not qualified to have that. But what I can say on that is that I think it's very easy for people who talk about a traumatic subject and splitting as that concept that we just discussed. Splitting is absolutely related to trauma. So a lot of the people who present issues and sort of arguments against what Brand has allegedly done are coming from a trauma-based perspective. They will have experienced things like this before. Naturally, they'll have a predilection against somebody that is accused of something like that. Whereas other people who possibly haven't experienced those things, or perhaps have, but have looked at his work and gone, oh, he's amazing, he's wonderful, they're going to be absolutely for him. So we've got a real issue in terms of how this issue is actually being dissected and understood and talked about. And then it comes down to his work. And I think it's really important that people start understanding that Russell Brand, he has a platform of over 6 million people, and probably more in terms of his overall reach. He is now single-handedly getting more media reach and communicating better than most mainstream media platforms are, just like Tucker Carlson and other people. And we've got a real battle here, appearing between mainstream media outlets and independent digital activists and communicators like Russell Brand. And the work that he has been doing is absolutely on the hot button of what is going on in society right now. We have a real problem with information warfare being undertaken against us, the British public, and public elsewhere, in terms of trying to control what we think and how we perceive topics that are crucially important. There's an article here that has been brought up by Reuters. I'll share this so you can all see it. This article is talking about how drug companies' profits are falling off a cliff because demand for COVID vaccines and other things related to the COVID pandemic have basically disappeared overnight. These organizations are facing stark losses, and you can see how much money they have made from the COVID pandemic and everything around it. And if you start considering this in terms of the light of Russell Brand's work, which has been about exploring the role of big pharma and other organizations in profiteering from nationally stoked issues controlled by mainstream media and other platforms, you can see that he is absolutely a threat to people's bottom line. And there is absolutely, I think it would be very, very difficult to separate the allegations against him from the timing and the issues and the work that he's been doing in terms of exposing this stuff. And I think it's very, very important for people to understand that, yes, sexual assault is a crime and it absolutely must be pursued. In the UK, we have some of the worst very worst prosecution rates for sexual assault crimes anywhere in the world. It is absolutely disgusting. The stats that have come out this year are just painting a picture that is getting worse. Reporting of it is going up, even though the rate of it appears to be going up as well. The prosecutions for it in terms of the actual number of crimes being prosecuted are going down. We have a serious problem in terms of how the justice industry in this country is working. It isn't, and it is no wonder that people don't want to report sexual assaults and other crimes of this nature. But the problem we've got is when you have allegations that are presented in this way by media, as Lizzie pointed out, as others have pointed out on the show today, that actually undermines the chances of getting a successful conviction. So why is it somebody would say, okay, we want justice, let's do this by trial by media rather than actually going through the courts? If they've been investigating this for 4 years and they have solid evidence that this person has committed a crime, you wouldn't put that all over the internet, you wouldn't put that all over the TV, you would give that straight to the police and a successful prosecution would happen, and then you release your show about it, then you release your program, and you get absolute wall-to-wall coverage, and everybody goes, well done, that's a great job, great investigative journalism, you've successfully revealed this horrible monster at the heart of British culture. And then everybody walks away happy, knowing that a sexual assault and these crimes have actually been pursued in the proper way and justice has prevailed. At the moment, all we're seeing is an absolute undermining of that principle. And it is no wonder that people don't want to report sexual assaults. And I'll add to this, this will be my final point for today. In terms of the people that have been coming out against Russell Brand on the internet and other places, and as you all know, I watch for information warfare. I have seen all of the usual suspects in terms of information warfare coming out and being a coordinated part of the work against Russell Brand's work. So this isn't about him, this is about his work, undermining and discrediting his work. And these people, these organizations are related to pharmaceutical lobbying organizations like Bio and Shots Heard Around the World and Team Halo and the Verified Initiative run by the UN and funded by George Soros and other organizations. There is very much a clear, precedented, coordinated campaign against his work. And I think if we fail to recognize that there is that campaign in place, plus the misrepresentation and the undermining of justice against victims of sexual assault, we've got a real problem. And we are giving in to our childish natures when it comes to splitting. We have to remain above this conversation and look at it from both sides. I don't like saying that, but we have to. We have to believe the victims, as they are presenting themselves, but we also have to respect due process. Otherwise, we live in a barbarian society, and that is not what we as socialists want.
Right, I think you've done a great job in prompting other people to speak as well. Thank you, Ben. Now, I did put a survey out and ask people to come forward and speak. So I'm going to bring in Kirsty, who said she wanted to say something. Kirsty.
Hello, I'm really sorry I didn't get the survey, went to my junk and I missed it. So I've just completed a Genders Masters and I specialise in violence against women. And what all of your panel, everybody who spoke, have all come up with some comment, which is a rape myth or used language that is not helpful when we're discussing violence against women. Ben especially has just contradicted himself. Everybody has said, we should allow due process to do it. This is the contradiction we've got in the left. We know due process does not work. We know that the rates, so I can be specific about the rates, are 1% to get a conviction for rape in the UK at the moment. It is 1% will actually get to court and get a conviction. And what Ben said there about, we'll due process, everybody goes to court and then everybody goes away happy at the end of it is absolutely false. What women are actually reporting is that they find due process actually like another rape, like another trauma that they have to go through. And we've got to remember that this is because of cuts. We can put it all back to cuts as well, to our police force, to the CPS, to even solicitors, trying to get a solicitor that's going to deal with it. But the language that we use, we need to start talking in a different language. So Lizzie at the front said, women who've experienced this. No, this isn't an experience women have. This is something that happens to women. This is something predators do to women. We need to change the narrative of how we talk about this away from the victim and put it on the predator so that we can understand them. Now, if we look at Brand, he told you he was a predator in his books. He literally said, yes, I'm a sex addict. Yes, I've done things that I'm ashamed of that I won't talk about in this book. If that was any other crime, if he was a burglar and he said, oh, yeah, I like engaging in a little bit of pinching and I burgle and I've done more than burgling, you wouldn't sit there and go, well, is he a burglar or not? It's come from his mouth. If you read what he's actually wrote about himself, he's telling you. And on the media side of it, of trial by media, I think we forget as well that the media have actually broke stories before and brought it to public light. If we talk about the Rochdale grooming gangs, for example, the police were aware of what was going on. Social services were aware of what was going on. They had all the evidence there and the police decided not to do anything. The establishment decided not to do anything because they didn't, which is a decent argument. They didn't want to fire up the racism side of it. And it was actually the Times that exposed that story, which then pushed the establishment to do something about it. And it did bring about really good convictions for the girls up north. So it is an issue of, we cannot trust the media. We know the media we know they lied about the miners. We know that they lied about Hillsborough, I think is a great example of that. We know we cannot trust the media. So we need to be forcing that as well, that we get a true and honest media outlet that is speaking from the truth, doesn't have a alternative agenda, and then we could actually believe what the media are telling us. So this whole, well, why didn't they go to the police? The amount of comments I have read, I've got really wound up about it, actually. It's the one thing that's really wound me up this week. Within the left, misogynism is still allowed. It's still allowed. If you go through the comments, I've been watching the comments that go up there. You watch some of the comments that men are making. They hold rape myths, and rape myths are, why didn't she go to the police? Oh, they're just going to the media for money. A lot of women will not go to the police because they know due process doesn't work. They also don't want to cause problems within their personal life to their family and their loved ones, so they'll often keep it to themselves. And we've got to bear in mind that a lot of women aren't as educated on what coercion and grooming look like. And I think this is what Russell Brand would have been absolutely brilliant at it. And if you ask your sex addict there, I bet he's got really good coercion and grooming skills to be able to get what he wants from that woman. So we need to be taking that into account as well. But I find it really frustrating on the left that this is the one subject that gets bounced down the narrative of what is important. And everybody's done it of, well, actually, it's not this assault that's more important. It's the media, or it's cuts, or it's, Ben's using psychology. He actually said, sorry, Ben, but I was getting really wound up with you. If he's a sex addict, that's an illness. We are making excuses for sexual predatory behaviour. The woman was talking about Benny Hill and giggling that, he was making sexual predatory comments. And this is the problem we have in society, is we allow this. We allow this narrative. We allow it to be a bit of a giggly subject when it isn't, especially when you look at the victims in it. And the trial form media goes the other way against victims as well. We've recently had a girl nearly raped by a football player. She actually got audio of that. She went to the police, she did all that. The media got hold of it, and she got absolutely hounded that she was a liar. And she dropped the case because of the media onslaught that she was getting, that she was a liar and dissecting everything she said. And the crazy thing about that is the football team don't even know whether or not they want to let him back on the football. And they want to ask women whether he should come back. We are so behind when it comes to violence against women and sexual crimes. We are just so behind the times of moving forward with this, with rape myths and everything. And it's just frustrating as a lefty girl as well. I'm a Marxist feminist. It's just frustrating when I see comrades using the language and carrying those ideologies within themselves of what is a perfect victim. We saw it in the comments there of, oh, well, he's famous, and these girls like to go for famous people. It doesn't matter whether or not you're famous or you've got money. If you are a sexual predator, you should be done. And the media can't win on this either, because Louis Theroux, when he interviewed Savile, he sort of brushed on the subject of, there was allegations, that they were aware Savile was a wrong 'un, but he never pushed that narrative with him. And then he faced backlash from the public that he didn't pursue the matter further, and that he should have done, that he should have pushed that further with Savile. So, yeah, it's one of those subjects. And I think, the women in the comments, I've just got a, brilliant, yeah. That's how it feels as a woman on the left, that we are so down the pecking order of what is important. I felt really disappointed in left-wing men these past couple of weeks, and the comments that they made about it, that the media is more important, cuts are more important, we believe in due process. Well, what is it? Because on the left, we know due process doesn't work. We know it's a corrupt system. But then when this is the only subject where suddenly we've got blind faith in due process that we know is corrupt. So we need to make our mind up. Are we dismantling these systems because we know they're corrupt? We know that they work for the bourgeoisie. We know that they work against the working class, or have we got this faith that actually these systems are okay and they work, and we can have blind faith in them? Thank you. I feel better after that rant. Thanks, Crispin. I was sat here
Well,
absolutely
thank you.
raging.
Thank you for coming on. It's great to hear you. And
Thank
you said so much there. We're having a big discussion here. I don't think it's been. I don't think we've had anything. I've never heard anything like. I've not heard what you've said before anywhere else.
Information as well. There is a book called Why Women Get Blamed for Everything, and it's by a Dr. Jessica Taylor, and it is the best book for, I would suggest, men, women read it, and it breaks down how we can break what rape myths are, how we all hold rape myths within ourselves without even knowing. We are socialized to believe that women lie about these things, which is a big rape myth. I would really recommend that book to anybody, and Russell Brand's book where he actually confesses that he did it, you know.
Right.
So,
okay.
But thank you, Crispin.
Thank you, Kirsty. All right. Elspeth has looked very animating, fed up. Elspeth, what would you like to say?
Okay, I'm just going to say a couple of really quick things before I get to the point I want to make. And that, following on from Kirsty, we've got all aerated about the hierarchy of racism, but there's also a hierarchy of equality. And I promise you that on the left, misogyny's been at the bottom. And I can tell you, I was in the WRP in the 1970s. It was gross and disgusting, and it can be internalized. And there are echoes of that still now, and there have been echoes of that on this call, and it's just really upsetting. Okay. Secondly, Jimmy Savile did good works. I'm just going to park that. Thirdly, Brand is exceptionally clever. I mean, he is a very bright guy, and he's exquisitely clever at plugging into the zeitgeist of the moment. And I'm going to park that there as well. And that makes him lots of money, and he's clever at it, and he's very good at it. Okay, getting on to my point. I'd like to say it's possible to be misogynistic, sexist, to harm, humiliate, dehumanize women without committing crimes. Okay? So let's forget about is he guilty or not. You don't need to have committed a crime to harm the women around you. All right. And I can promise you, I've had lots of men in my life do horrible things to me that I couldn't have taken to the police. But it's something that adds up and adds up and adds up. And I can't applaud Kirsty more. I thought her contribution was brilliant. Secondly, corporations have safeguarding duties. OK, they have a duty of care to their employees for a start. And part of that duty of care is to protect women from sexual abuse and sexual harassment. Men too, but obviously women are far more likely to be victims of that. When you're a TV company, your duty of care is not just to your staff, but it's also to your audiences, because you're exposing audiences to people, whether it's Hughie Green or Jimmy Savile or whoever. Now, how do we make safeguarding decisions? We don't go to court and ask for a criminal evidence of proof before we take steps to protect people. We actually look at what is the probability, what's the likelihood that if we don't do this, people are going to be harmed. Now, before people jump up and down, if I could just point out to you that that level of proof is what's required in civil courts. It's the level of proof used to decide whether children are taken away from their families, where a learning disabled adult can safely live. Really important decisions are made based on the balance of probability. That's the sort of legalese for it. Now, any corporation having heard the allegations, and actually corporations, BBC, Channel 4, and several of those companies did hear those allegations, did sweep Fanny Adams about it and failed. Any organisation going forward having heard these allegations, and there are many, once you've got many people making allegations, it's very easy to go over on the balance of probability. If I employ this person or make a show with this person, I could be putting women in harm's way. If they ignore that, they would be completely ignoring their safeguarding obligations. And I think people need to remember there are three levels here. And I think Soham, for example, showed that very, very well. You had a man that lots of people had made complaints about, and no one took any notice. Then he murdered 2 girls. And actually, because of Soham, corporations, and particularly police, social services, health, etc., they are obliged to share any allegations with each other so that people like, I can't remember the guy's name and so on, but people like him don't get jobs. So even if they've never had a conviction, they won't get a job in an area where they're exposed to vulnerable people. And remember, women vary in their vulnerability. You know, there are women in these audiences and in staff who have been traumatized. That was something Kirsty brought up. There are women in who will be very socially vulnerable because of perhaps Asperger's syndrome, for example. There will be women who are vulnerable for all manner of reasons. We don't, you know, we vary in how resilient we are and how strong we are in being able to cope. And for some women, being used as a masturbatory object by a man, you can throw it off. But for other women, it's really, really damaging. And so, you know, please don't talk about it as if it's rape or nothing. Men harm women along a spectrum of sexual, and you, Crispin, are ignoring that by saying that the allegations are nothing to do with his behaviour. They're everything to do with his behaviour. Everything. You cannot ignore a man's behaviour until suddenly he's raped or killed somebody. That's not how you protect women. It's not how you protect any vulnerable people. I'm sorry to be so preachy, but honestly, this debate has had me tearing my hair out. I just can't believe what some of the things I've been hearing, frankly. Thank you.
Well, thank you for speaking. Cheers. Right. Now I'm learning a lot today. Lots of people putting their hands up. Who am I going to speak to now? Dennis Malley is waving a lot. Dennis?
I'm unmuted. I hope in what I say now, I will be understood to be a feminist. It's perfectly possible for men to be feminists as well as women. I entirely endorse what both Kirsty and Ben have said, but I want to make a different point because we talked about male sex addiction. I've had stuff happen in the last couple of months which made it quite clear to me that female sex addiction is real too. And I don't think it would be wrong for me to go into details of why I come to that conclusion. But as with what Ben said, I think it links with early childhood trauma. And I put that out there because I could go into a lot of detail of why I've come to this conclusion, but I don't think it would necessarily be useful. But that's where I'm at the moment through what I've actually had to observe and go through maybe in the last couple of months. That's really it.
Right. Well, thank you.
I put it out there for discussion.
Cheers. Thank you, Dennis. And Richard's put his hand up for a while. Richard?
Yes, hello, Crispin. In terms of the whole Russell Brand situation, the UK has very strict libel laws, so I don't see Channel 4 putting these things out if they knew that maybe some of what was being said was untrue. So I think that most of the allegations are legitimate and maybe true. That's just what I want to say about the whole issue. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'm going to Daniel Taylor, who has a podcast, Complaints on a Plate, has put out a video on this. So I just wondered what would you like to add to this? The conversation's been very enlightening, Daniel.
Yeah, I've got a few things to say. I mean, I find, as I'm sure you do, Crispin, that you agree with points raised by everybody, and even points that sort of contradict what someone previously has said, because it is a very confusing issue. And I think the main thing about it, which makes it difficult to talk about, is that it's polarizing. And actually, that's quite an interesting thing that's happened to Russell Brand, because the reason that Russell Brand became so popular over the last few years, he went from having a decent YouTube channel to this 6 million and mostly American, is that he has been trying to navigate this increasingly polarized debate on just every aspect, sort of political topic that we have, and the way that it becomes kind of with you, it feels like in your interest to not give any credence to the other side of the debate. But I think that's just sort of self-defeating. And if we talk about specifically with Russell Brand, okay, so there's sort of two broad kind of positions. One is that the sexual assault allegations are true, or at least very, very likely to be true, and also very serious. And the focus should be on that, and focusing on this other aspect of a media attack is in a way silencing these women, and it's letting Brand off. And then there's the flip side to that, which is basically the opposite. But in taking these positions, I think there is actually a way of discussing this without having to take a side, and is actually beneficial to the sort of core place that you're coming from for what you're actually arguing. So in terms of the sexual assault, if you dismiss the media attack element of it and the evidence towards that, you're also kind of not really realizing that what it's actually saying is that there are many, many other people out there in the world, not here in my room, luckily, that are also probably guilty of this kind of thing. Or at least there is evidence out there in the world that suggests that they should be investigated. At least, this was a 4-year investigation by the Sunday Times, the Times, and Dispatches. There should be some investigating into these other people, and there isn't. And that is a political decision. That's politically made by powerful newspapers. They're the only ones that have the resources to do this. And so I think it's worth saying, personally, I take the allegations very seriously. And I think anyone who doesn't, or thinks that the media attack is more important and we should dismiss the allegations, also fall into the same pattern, because you're then saying, well, the media attack is important. Brand is someone who, does important work, and he's being targeted. And so that we should dismiss the attack, or we should try and focus on the broader debate here and say, no, look, we should take these really importantly, and then push out from that and say, why doesn't the media investigate other people? Why is it that there was such a big investigation on Brand, and there had been such a hyper focus on Brand over the institutions that were involved, over the other people that mentioned in the article that seemed to enable him, over the people that he was around at the time? And what the article itself says, that a lot of this was known for years. There were articles published in the Daily Mail in the mid, like 2015, around that sort of time. And this wasn't picked up, and this wasn't investigated, and now it is. And that, I think, is something that we can all agree on as being a problem, right? If you're both on side of like, it's a media attack, why is it now? Also, if you're on the other side of this, well, yes, well, why isn't this stuff picked up? And I just think there's a way of like thinking about it in terms of the doubling down on your position is not going to convince somebody else. And it's also actually kind of weakens your position. So one more thing I just want to say in terms of people who are very much on the side of the media attack angle is you should call out people who seemingly are on your side, but are extremely dismissive of the allegations. I'm personally involved very much and find it very interesting what's happening with the media attack. And I think it's fascinating. And it's also because it pertains to a lot of other things that I'm involved in politically. But I don't want to dismiss the allegations at all. I think, Brand, personally, at this point, he needs to sue the paper. If he's going to deny it flat out, then it shouldn't really be on him, but it is now on him to try and clear his name. And if he doesn't, then I think you have to say, well, look, we can't just go back to watching Russell Brand like we did before. Like the allegations are serious, despite how they came about. It's a separate issue, but if we want to like take the issue of it being separate seriously, we have to also take the allegations seriously. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, he should.
loads
I
of
mean,
stuff we can-
he should be addressing, like was said earlier. I mean, it's not just the allegations, but his behaviour. I mean, he maybe
Well, like-
should be making a more of a point about his whole behaviour, not just those specific
well,
allegations.
on terms of his behavior, again, it's about information, right? We know all of this information now, and we're being also made to look at older stuff, you know, TV shows that millions of people have watched over the decades, and reframe them knowing what we know now. And all of this sort of stuff, I think, is very important and is very interesting, and is to some degree quite damning about brand. But why are we shown this and not other stuff? Because, you know, there are lots of other, like, something that's often talked about is that these women came forward. Now, in the case of one of them, that's definitely not true. The one with the most serious allegation, she was sought out by the Times newspaper. And there are, I'm sure, many women in this country who have faced sexual harassment, if not worse, by powerful people and not so powerful people who have maybe attempted to reach out or don't even bother because they just don't think they're going to be heard, who are waiting maybe for the media to come knocking on their door, but the media won't come knocking on their door because they're not somebody who's in the sort of political position as Russell Brand. And that, I don't know, I don't understand why that is not something that everybody can get behind as a really serious issue with the way that this stuff is reported in this country. And it doesn't change my judgment on Brand, and it shouldn't change anybody's judgment on Brand. And it shouldn't change the focus. Like, why can't there be a dual focus? Why do you have to be dismissive of one angle of this?
Yeah,
that's all I wanted to say. And that's
Oh,
what my
look.
video's on. If you want to see the video, it's on my
it's on Complaints on a Plate. So if you want to see Daniel's video, it's Complaints on a Plate on YouTube. Thank you, Daniel. Michael Spencer's had his hand up for a bit now. How you doing, Michael?
Oh, hi, Crispin. Yes, nice to see you. Thanks for letting me on. No, I'm so grateful for Kirsty and Elspeth's contributions here, because I'm very frustrated and disappointed, and perhaps I don't know, perhaps I expected it really. A lot of the contributions here very much so much defence of Russell, not so much thought about the victims here. Now, I think this whole media attack, I think it's a bit of a red herring here. Now, I'm not saying that's not an issue, but there is such a thing as investigative journalism, you know. And I mean, does that not count for anything? Is that just the media? Is that just the wicked media? You know, let's take Jimmy Savile, for example. I mean, surely we would agree that a lot of that was through the media, that a lot of this came to light, and so on and so forth. We could say, why is it now? Why is it all this kind of thing? But it did happen. I think there are more important issues here as well about the whole culture around, for example, television, the comedy circuit, and so on. Plus, I wanted to address a couple of things that Ben was saying about the great job he thinks Russell's doing these days. I think, I mean, Ash Sarkar, she may not be our favourite, person with regard to Navarra media and so on, but she made an excellent point, excellent conjecture, I think, when she said, you know, Russell now, he's built up millions of followers who are basically, a lot of them are right-wing conspiracy theorists, and that's what the kind of thing Ben was talking about. He's saying, doing such a great job now. Yes, it is, Ben. And I found some of your contribution a bit patronising, Ben, as well. I'm sorry, but he's onto a right wing now. He went through a phase. Now I was taking it as well.
Hold on a sec. All right, this right wing conspiracy theorist thing. I mean, why is it right wing to believe in
COVID? Well, because Crispin.
Well, no, I mean just a conspiracy generally. I mean, like the conspiracy of lying about Iraq. I mean, that would you'd have been
no, Crispin,
wouldn't you?
Crispin, I was all for Russell a few years ago when he was doing the truths. I was very much a supporter of him. He's gone into a very right wing. He's gone into COVID skepticism. He's gone into specifically. He's had his platform. You see, he keeps platforming certain contributors like Jordan Peterson, who are no very right wing characters. And I was so disappointed. When he first came on, I thought he was going to have a challenging debate with him, and nothing of the kind. He's just platforming these. He's a great admirer of the likes of David Icke and these sort of characters. So I'm not at all enamored with Russell Brand these days. But so I'm with regards to that.
Let me just did that colour your opinion on
No,
on him,
no,
but you
no,
don't.
Crispin, I'm going to make a serious point here, okay? I totally back up what Kirsty and Elspeth say. This is not a personal prejudice against Russell. What I'm saying is I think there's too much emphasis here on consideration about media attack and so on and so forth. What I think we should be looking at is that there has been what appears to be corroborative evidence against Russell Brand. And obviously, it's not for any of us to say whether he's guilty or not guilty. I quite agree. But nevertheless, there is what appears to be corroborative evidence there, and there needs to be due process. Now, of course, we can debate the wisdom of whether it should have been broadcast out and all that kind of thing. But I think that should be respected, and also I think we should be also looking at the wider culture and how we're all complicit, perhaps in laughing along with the kind of humor and the kind of attitudes that Russell Brand was doing, saying the noughties. Now, when I was a little enamored with Brand when he was doing his truths, and I really did enjoy that show he had, I wasn't familiar with the stuff he's doing the noughties. Now, I'm not saying I'm innocent of everything, but I'm really quite shocked to see the on-air sexual harassment he was, applying to his assistants, and not just like, oh, cheeky Benny Hill tickly stuff. We're talking about really, disgraceful, disgusting things we saw in Dispatches. So this is the culture, and when we laugh along, it's kind of like the whole culture wars and the woke debate. When we laugh along with the kind of humour that he was making about forcing, I won't go through all the details, but oral sex and so on, and all this kind of, and it turns out in reality he was actually doing this kind of thing. It does make one reflect about how about comedy and how whole attitude to how we laugh along with things and how we challenge these things afterwards, like with Jimmy Carr and his joke about the Roma and so on and so forth, and it's only afterwards we kind of reflect on what may be the underlying issues and how Ricky Gervais has obviously defended, say, free speech and say, well, anything goes. Well, I don't believe it does. I think these things clearly have a real effect in the real world, and I think we need to reflect sometimes on what's been said and the effect it can have on people, So I think there are I just think there are other issues here, and no, I'm not being, as I say, not being particularly chippy about Russell, because I feel very disappointed and saddened hearing this stuff about him, because I was very much a fan of the truths, but I do think we should just give a little bit more thought, to the victims who have come forward. And people say, why now? Why now? As I say, Ash Sarkar made a good point, I think, with regards to, he may well have built up these followers now because it gives them some insularity against, because he has a power base now, which is not, if he was in liberal Hollywood, as he has been, or if he was somewhere else, then obviously his downfall could, it could destroy him. Whereas now he's got a people who may well believe, that there's media conspiracy. They're more likely to support him on that level. So I do think that we need to, if there are other issues we need to look at, it's sort of like wider cultural issues within the entertainment industry, because it's been alleged now, of course, that there are many other comedians out there. It's not just about Russell Brand, not just about this kind of Rasputin figure that he's been portrayed as. There are other, predatory figures out there, and what's being done about it, So in a way, the investigative journalism, there can be something to be said for this. It's not just a media frenzy. It's not all a conspiracy. It's like there may be responsible journalism there as well. So I'm just putting that out there. And I do appreciate. Thank you for Elspeth and Kirsty for putting a contrary view as well. But that's what I have to say. Thank you, Crispin.
All right. Thank you, Michael. I'm going to bring back on Lizzie, because she said she's going to go somewhere else, and I said I'd bring her back on, but it's only fair. Lizzie, what do you think about what you've heard from?
Well, all these people, by the way, Kirsty, it wasn't me that spoke about what you were talking about. It was Trish, I believe. But all these people are coming forward with the assumption that Russell Brand is guilty until he proves himself innocent. The thing is that due process is the only tool we have in punishing perpetrators, and it must be used. Okay, so you think it's not doing the job. I think it's not doing the job. Well, we have to vote in better legislators to change the law, or do something to change the way the system operates. Yeah, Kirsty's quite correct. The cuts to all of our public services, we've got no defense system anymore. So if you're accused of a crime, you have no wherewithal, no resort to any legal counsel apart from they're called now public defenders, and they're assigned to you, and they work on 0-hour contracts, and they are not going to put themselves out for you unless you've got the money to pay them to do a good job. So no matter how passionate they are, they're not going to have the resources. They're all on very little pay now. So the thing that people are saying is that, but the evidence that's been presented to you has been presented to you via mainstream media, who also presented to you that Jeremy Corbyn is an anti-Semite and a terrorist supporter. They're also the people that presented to you that Hillsborough didn't happen. They also presented to you that the Iraq war was necessary. They also presented to you all these stories that are simply proven to be not true. So while I have been a victim, and I know numerous other people have been victims of sexual assault, but we must presume anyone accused of anything to be innocent until proven guilty. Thank you. That's all I had to say. I really have to go now.
All right, have a good day. Thank you. Now, who hasn't spoken before? Nick. Nick's not been on before. How you doing, Nick?
I'm fine, Crispin. I'm going to hand you over to Paula, who's got really passionate about this debate. Is that okay, my partner?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was only really, I'm sort of reiterating some of the other people on here. It just it appears on, especially on social media, that there's either a sort of camp brand, so you're for him, or you're for the conspiracy thing of him getting shut down by the media. And I happen to think it's I'm down the middle on this, where why can't it be both? Yes, I feel like he's being shut down by the media and perhaps by politicians as well, but also perhaps he's guilty, perhaps of his you know, the allegations. So it's just rather frustrating. I've seen on social media, like I said, there's either this side or this side, and I just think it is both. So I think that perhaps the women have been, perhaps allegedly, the women have been abused by him and then used by the media. So that was all I wanted to say.
Yeah, good point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we've got people who Valerie's not spoken. There's people who want to come back in. I'll put you on at the end. Valerie.
Yeah, hi, thanks. I got so angry in the first half. I really did. Kirsty and Elspeth, thank you so much for what they said, because I couldn't agree more. I haven't looked at the mainstream media on this. I very rarely look at the mainstream media in most things, but I did look at it on Novara. They used a lot of the actual clips from the research and so on. I found that very, very enlightening. I take totally the bit about being, you know, innocent until you're proved guilty. That goes without saying, but that keeps being put ahead of taking the slightest bit of notice, not only of one case, not only of 3 cases, but of goodness knows how many cases. And if you couple that with the fact that he didn't only describe himself as promiscuous, I mean, that's nothing, that's just a bit of whatever. He described himself as a predator over and over and over again. And I find that a problem, not least because it's like, I'm a predator and that's fine. It's like being a sex addict. I'm a sex addict and so I can't do anything. Well, if you're being a sex addict with somebody who's totally fine about it, if you're having consensual sex, fine. That's yeah, go ahead, have fun. But if it's with someone who isn't totally happy about it, or with someone who is young and cannot really know what is going on and works it out later, then that's not fine. I also take up the point that was made about, I think it was Elspeth made, about lots of abuse being outside of the realm of crime. And I mean, that certainly I can, you know, it sounds trivial to someone who's not involved. For example, we had a member of our local party who kept a picture in his pocket from I suppose some club or other that somebody had been having a party in. And it had a picture of a topless woman on it. And he did rather enjoy getting this picture out and showing it people. That's not illegal. That's not criminal. It makes you feel very, very uncomfortable as a woman. Or it made me feel, and a lot of us feel, very uncomfortable. Then there was some people I used to work with, some blokes I used to work with. They were a little group together and they decided they would have a competition to see how many boobs they could touch of people in the staff room. And there was a gradation as to how many marks you got for whatever. I don't know what the outcome was for this. I don't know who won their competition. These things are normal. They go on all the time, every day, and they are excused, as the Spanish guy was excused for just being a normal person when he did what he did in the Women's World Cup final.
Right, right.
And I think there was one final. Oh no, I think that's about it. I do not think that we should just be brushing this aside, and I do not think that at the moment there's any likelihood of the victims getting a fair hearing. But I hope they will, and I hope that Russell Brand will be properly looked at and assumed to be innocent until he's shown to be guilty, if he is. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Valerie. Good. Right, I'm not going to play the interview of Dr. Bob Gill because there's a lot of people want to speak. I think and I've learned a lot from this discussion. I've heard different. Yeah, I know Francis should wave your hand. I've learned a lot from different people talking here, and I don't think I've witnessed this on social media, and people are being respectful as well, which is good. Susie Parker.
Hello, hi. Great discussion. What I wanted to say is, oh, gosh, sorry, nerves. Can you prompt me, Crispin, please?
No, it's all right. You know, we're all friends on here, all comrades. Don't feel under any pressure to be say anything or do it. You can just say hello if you want. We'll move on and talk again another time if you want.
No, with the whole media thing, the whole trial by media, I don't want to go over what everybody else is saying. That this has been. This is a little bit like this. I'm not minimizing what's happened to these women because I've been in this situation. This has happened to me, not with him, obviously, but this has happened some time ago. This is a little bit out of context with the person I think that he was then and the person he is now. Very much in agreement with this splitting, because I'm getting it on my social media as well, with friends of mine who have judged him to be guilty. we have to agree, we have to abide by this due process, whether we agree with it or not. But I also think with the media, like having it being brought up now, it is like everywhere. He is still he's a male celebrity. He's not the first person to have done this. We have Conservative MPs who are regularly brought up for be either assaulting or abusing women, and it kind of it dies down. We have this other story of Prince Andrew in Ukraine, and 10-year-old children. Why is this overriding something that is being alleged against a member of our royal family? And that is my main point here.
Right. Yeah.
That is
exactly.
that is huge. That is like these are highly privileged people, and yet our media is and many of us people are so focused on this a celebrity.
Well, what? Yeah, exactly. I mean, what? I mean, when you mentioned about other cases, I mean, the Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein. What was going on there? Why haven't all the media just gone in for that and found out the names on that guy? I mean, surely those names need to be released, and we need to discuss that. Why aren't they doing it? Was Murdoch a mate of some of the people in Epstein's book? I don't know. I mean, is that where we are? Thank you,
Very
Susie.
probably. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for coming on. Cheers. Yeah. Who else has anyone not spoken? Oh yeah, Francis. Sorry, Francis. Yeah. Sorry, Francis. You're coming on.
I'm worked in the entertainment industry since the late 60s. It's everywhere. It is everywhere. The fame of these people who are being promoted as sex offenders is masking what is a major problem in the entertainment industry and other industries. I personally experienced it. I now going to say is, what do we do about it? I've done an enormous number of theatre workshops based on forum theatre, which is participatory, which has looked at women. I did it at the Serpentine Gallery. I've done it all over the place for many, many years, worked with Auguste Boal. I think one of the big questions is, what do we do about it? And I know there are plenty of women who do something about it. I mean, my particular techniques for doing something about it is stony. I became a very stony-faced person, but I did not like what was going on. And I went off and started the independent alternative theatre movement, which is now all over the country, and where I'm sure there are plenty of men, possibly women, who are involved in this sort of behaviour because it's socio-politically embedded. And so my interest is, how do you stop it? How do women realise they're not victims, they are targets? I think the use of the word victim is very damaging. I'm not a victim. I have been a target. I'm not even too old to be a target. I won't tell you how old I am. But the fact of the matter is that we are targets. It's commercial. It's for some kind of batty pleasure like this, what's his name? Brandt was clearly feeling without the slightest sense of guilt, to the point where he could show off about it and wave his face at the camera. This is quite normal in the entertainment industry. The fight back is absolutely crucial. We need to combat notions of fame, but we really need to think about the women and the men who are being targeted by this in the shadows of not being famous. And I'm a member of Equity. I've been on the Women's Committee in Equity. I'm on the Race Equality Committee in Equity. I've done lots of stuff, and we do think about these things. We do. But really, it's the unfamous, it's the ordinary, everyday, so-called ordinary. I don't think they're ordinary at all, as a matter of fact. Ordinary is a terrible word, who are continually targeted and have to work out what to do. And many of them do something about it. If you're targeted by a famous theatre director, there are things you can do probably without getting fired, but you have to have thought it through and hope that your trade union will support you. I think that's all I'm saying. Can we stop talking about fame, please? And can we start talking about people who are the targets of this stuff and who are endlessly going on through it? Thank you very much, Crispin.
Thank you. Trish.
Thanks so much for letting me come back in, Crispin. I felt like I rushed my little bit in a tiny piece, and I did want to clarify some of the things that I think I've been hearing. I think the truth is, I don't think that the expose by the media was ever about sexual safety for women. I don't think the people who would have approached those women would have been sensitive to those women's needs. I don't think those women would have been protected by the journalists that have discussed this case with them. I don't think that they are safe now. I also don't think they'll get a fair hearing as much as Russell Brand won't get a fair hearing. The truth is, the whole thing has been destroyed by allowing the media to take over the process. I know that our media is full of lies. We all do here. We've seen it before. The big lie that we've seen from the film that we've all talked about. So I don't trust the media. And now I think if any woman comes forward and says that Russell Brand raped her, many of us might not believe her. And that's terrible because most women are telling the truth. And the truth is we should be believing women. But I don't think we can be doing it through this process. I would have loved Crispin to have seen this program be about how men like Russell Brand have been protected by staff and media and TV programs to be sexual predators, how they've been allowed and facilitated. If this had been a program that talked about how men like beautiful looking, charismatic men who want to have lots of sex are helped to do it by the people working around them. And they're helped by lots of industry within show business, I'm sure, as I mentioned earlier. If this had been a program exposing that, it would have been fantastic. And I want to come back to some things that have been said about, yes, exposing some sexual crime and activity is vital by media, such as what happened to the Rotherham women and girls. The truth is, that was about exposing a failure in public services, failure of police, failure of barristers, failure of social services, failure of all sorts. We sometimes need the media to expose that, but to expose one person, I just think it spoils the trial. And even though our system, our due process is flawed and it has lots of problems, and women are not getting the convictions that they deserve, it doesn't mean that we therefore choose journalists to take over the job. Journalists, you've got to be kidding. Most of them are full of shit. So that's all I wanted to say, and thanks for letting me come back. Solidarity.
I think you're right. I mean, there could have been different approaches to this, but I think in a sense we had to kind of let everyone speak first, and then maybe next time we can move on to a direction, because as Francis was saying, it's what we do next, really. I don't really want to be stuck in this argument between different views on it, because it's not getting anywhere. We have to, we know, all of the people on here know that we don't like the behaviour that we've seen from Russell Brand in the documentary, and we need to stop that in all kinds of ways. As Francis said, not just celebrities. Thank you, Trish. Right, I'm getting a bit tired now, so I have to move on to go back to Daniel and then Tony. I said, I hear you think I'm snubbing you. I'm not snubbing you. I'll back onto you, Tony, after Daniel.
Thanks for having me back, Crispin. I really agree with what Trish just said in terms of the focus. Just on from what people have been talking about, other examples, there's a Tory MP at the moment who is unnamed by the police and the media, who's been under investigation for rape for, I don't know, over a year possibly now, keeps getting extended bail. They're likely, it seems increasingly likely, to run in the next general election without anybody in the public knowing that they're in this investigation. Is there an expose on that? Is there a documentary about that? Now, I'm not saying there shouldn't be a documentary about Russell Brand, but just appreciating where you're being told to focus relentlessly. In every newspaper on Sunday having the same headline. It's not that the news of brands shouldn't be out there. It's just that the way that it is done. If you're really worried about sexual assault in this country, you should be concerned about that. And it's not about dismissing the brand allegations. The other thing I want to say about that is also kind of coming back from what Trish says. It's the Times newspaper, it's the Murdoch media that have exposed this and focused it entirely on brand rather than on all the institutions around him and the media culture. It was in the documentary, it talks about the Sun newspaper calling him Shagger of the Year on numerous occasions, which is a Murdoch, and people are like, well, it's very serious allegations. What a great article. It's like, you can't take that in isolation. The media itself creates the situation and then demonizes one individual. And also, there was a Guardian article the next day, which immediately started talking about this narrative. Now we'll see who really. I'll get. This is the. Can I just read you the opening paragraph of an article by Jim Waterson that just came out the next day? Seemed pretty well prepared. On the Sunday, it said, Russell Brand has spent the past decade telling the world not to trust the mainstream media industry. Now the comedian will find out whether the wider public has bought into the scorched earth narrative or if they believe the claims of rape and sexual assault reported in the Sunday Times and on Channel 4 over the weekend. So it immediately makes the idea that if you have any kind of criticism of the Times article and the way that's been presented, that you are part of, that you believe in these positions that Brand holds about COVID or about Ukraine. Like that this is a brand created these questionings of the narrative around Ukraine and COVID. And it was all built so that he could cover for his crimes. And that now that anybody that maybe questions Ukraine is actually just someone that's been duped by Russell Brand. So this is immediately like, instead of focusing on the Times and focusing on the Murdoch empire and focusing on the TV and how they create the situation to create sexual predators, the idea is focusing on people who watched Brand's material being sort of duped into being apologists for a rapist. And these are things that are, being pushed by the media. And so if you, by the Times newspaper as well. And so if you take the allegation seriously, you should also take the media attack angle seriously. That's all I'm saying. Yeah, thanks for having me on again, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, do you think, we've been given this story by this investigation and we should push for a particular outcome from it that maybe the media are not presenting. I mean, we need to have safety for women going forward to when they are given such horrendous treatment by predators. And we need to change the way the police are, that there's no concern about going to see them. Instead of us thinking about we've got to get Russell Brand off YouTube. I mean, that's like that isn't the inevitable next move, is it? I mean, that isn't really going to resolve the situation, getting him off YouTube. I mean, that's just, it's like they've given us a path that has nothing really to do with the problem.
I mean, I don't think Brand can come back from this really ever to some extent, and he'll have to fight it for a long time, and we'll see where that goes. But yeah, I think ignoring the other issues is also ignoring other abuse issues. We're on the same team in that regard. And also one more thing, there was published an hour after the article on Saturday about Russell Brand, the Sunday Times published another article explaining their investigation. It's a really interesting read, and it talks about how the investigation started in 2019. What they don't say is why, and it's none of the serious allegations because they came later, as it explains in the article. So it doesn't say what triggered their initial investigation. And I think I just think it's really fascinating that this has come about after clearly the Murdoch papers have refused to investigate him for decades, and there's no accountability about that. Why, if it was so clear for so long, did the paper decide to, or both the Times and the Sunday Times separately initially decided to investigate Russell Brand before coming together? Yeah, I don't understand why we can't all rally around that and just hate on Murdoch as we used
I think
to.
we should. I think Kirsty. It'd be good if Kirsty could come on next week to talk about how the police should be changed, how the whole system should be changed to support those people who've been attacked.
Yeah, I
'Cause
mean,
that,
another thing is
that issue. Why isn't that? Why am I not seeing that on main? I'm not seeing that as a discussion at all.
well, yeah, a lot of the arguments are, well, of course they went to the media, which they didn't. The media went to them. But anyway, of course they went out. These stories came out in the media because women don't trust the police. Okay, that's a huge problem that we don't discuss. And again, we could all get behind that. And I bet you, if you started a campaign against that, a newspaper that wouldn't back you would be the Times.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Daniel. Good. Thanks for staying so long. Well, a long discussion. And Tony, I promised that you'd come on. How are you doing, Tony? All right.
Yeah, thank you, Crispin. I have a number of points to make it, and it is a very difficult and in some ways nuanced topic. I think the first thing I want to say is I don't buy into this idea that some men or even women are addicted to sex. We're medicalizing a social and cultural problem, and that helps us to ignore it. Oh, they've got some form of disease, therefore we need to treat the addiction. I just don't buy into that one.
Do you believe in drug and alcohol addiction, though?
Well, yes, because people take drugs and then they get addicted. I don't believe sex is the same thing. It's biologically programmed into us. It's entirely
Food?
different.
Do you believe in food addiction?
Well, no, I don't believe in it because, I mean, if you didn't take food, you'd die. It's not an addiction. It's a necessity. It's just not the same thing, Crispin, really.
But, I mean, this idea that people want to fix their feelings by taking something and they
Well, in that
overuse
case,
that.
everything. I mean, breathing air is an addiction. Where do you stop? I mean, no. Let's be serious about this.
I am serious.
I
carry
honestly
on.
don't think that sex is an addiction. Yeah, I mean, it's a fairly necessary part of our social and personal life. And sometimes we get it wrong. And sometimes people seek sex when they're really seeking something else. I mean, it's also a means of conveying feelings and all sorts of things.
Yeah. All right. What about gambling addiction? Someone said. Do you believe in that?
Yes, I do, because it's a behavior that you don't have to indulge in. It really is different. So let's not overgeneralize. But the point I'm going to make really is this. Firstly, if Russell Brand had been an echo chamber to the establishment, like Jimmy Savile was, does anyone seriously think there would have been an investigation into him? This has all happened because Brand was a thorn in the side of those who hold power. That's why the government, even though he's innocent until proven guilty, what's the first thing they do? They write to the social media platforms to get him deplatformed because they don't want to hear what he's saying. I mean, it's so obvious, it beggars belief. I mean, there are other questions that should be raised. Even suppose he's guilty, and he may be guilty. I simply don't know. What would be the purpose of sending him to prison? Because I believe that the only people who should go to prison, I'm not really very keen on the institution, not surprisingly, are those who are a danger here and now to other people. Savile was clearly a danger, and of course he was protected by 2 police forces at least, by Margaret Thatcher, who incidentally covered up paedophile rapists. Her own personal aide was a paedophile rapist. And we have at the present time the right royal rapist and abuser, Prince Andrew, who the Met have said they will refuse to investigate. I mean, this is how justice is done selectively. So I don't know. What I do know is that Russell Brand can't possibly get a fair trial now because it's all been discussed in the media. I mean, how can anyone be unprejudiced and go into that jury room without holding some form of opinion? I just don't think it's feasible now because he has been tried in the public arena.